time, core clearing trading systems. You need robust failover mechanisms as well. So huge focus on all of those critical core trading functionality. CCPs, on a similar note, clearly around disaster recovery, how they can handle some of those peak volume scenarios, how they can continue with handling margin calls, handling collateral movements, especially when the markets are a little more volatile. And all of that needs careful planning. It needs the right sort of technology to handle it. And really, that seems to be a bit of a take right across the trading life cycle, keeping that performance, regardless of what your own metrics are as an organization, under those peak conditions. And scalability, redundancy, yes, they've always been important, but becoming even more important in designing these systems. I suppose, Andy, what do you think from a technical perspective? And horizontal scaling is often sort of the buzzword used. What do we need to do to design those sort of ideal systems that can handle these stronger loads?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think it is something that you need to take into account right from the design phase of your system architecture. Your application needs to be comfortable being one of many of itself as opposed to being the only one. It aids in having a kind of a more modular design where you can expect that some parts of your system can kind of grow horizontally and exist as one of a group of itself. And then it comes right through to the infrastructure where the way that these components talk to each other, whether that's by message queue, needs to be comfortable disseminating messages like that. And then ultimately the compute that you're running on, whether that's directly on hardware or kind of a platform that will handle that for you, like Kubernetes, can make that much easier for you. And then that can be configured to scale those components as a result of any number of factors, including just system resources. So it is something to take into consideration right from the beginning, right to go live.
So essentially having components that can essentially replicate and scale up as volume
Mm,
scale up as well. Cloud isn't the simple answer, though, is it? It's not just a case of, put it all in the cloud and it's all fine. There's a lot more to it than that.
no, that's definitely the case. I think one of the advantages that's come kind of post cloud is that a lot of these techniques, whether it's Kubernetes or kind of its adjacent technologies, means that in this kind of post cloud, kind of hybrid cloud, moving back stuff on prem, a lot of that learning is really coming kind of continuing onwards. And whether that means that you run a Kubernetes cluster in house, or whether it's just you taking the same philosophies of how do we kind of have these components auto scale horizontally or vertically. It is a great learning opportunity. Yeah.
Definitely. And something that regulators clearly are looking at closely as well, even if not the specifics of the technology, certainly how organizations handle it. And I think that neatly brings us to the next question, always highly topical around regulatory and compliance. And yet, the top answer out of a range of answers, which were almost identical in numbers, really was around cybersecurity. How do we safeguard sensitive data? Always hugely important. We've seen incidents in the market. Clearly, organizations, regardless of their size, frankly, need to do more to protect against this. Aside from the cybersecurity, yes, from a broker's perspective, there's always more reporting to do. If you're trading across jurisdictions, dealing with different types of trade reporting, different types of reg reporting, making sure you've got processes in place to handle all of those volumes. Again, incredibly important, a kind of constant challenge with the nature of some of these evolving regulations as well. Exchanges similarly have to respond to that, certainly in the case of the EU and later to the UK as well. You have MiFID 2, MiFID 3, sort of raising its head in various incarnations, MiFID 3, MiFIR, EMIR 3, of course, another area regulatory change is quite crucial also, and exchanges need to respond to that. CCP is also quite interesting. They're still impacted by a lot of the margin model changes that EMIR 3 is bringing in, even small changes in margining models now gradually needing more approval. They're experimenting, of course, with different types of margin models, different types of margining. I'm sure we can probably talk on that more in another slide. But again, that's a big impact for them as well as to how they can respond to that while also improving their bottom line. And of course, DORA, has come in, and similar regulations in the UK, around the world as well, just really raising the bar, not just on cyber controls, but a lot of both internal oversight within the organization and third parties as well. Certainly vendors like ourselves form a crucial part of that. Andy, I suppose what's your take on this? How can we improve? Let's take cybersecurity really. What are the
Mm.
key steps that organizations need to take, and what do we as software vendors have to do to make sure we're really delivering systems that are as cyber secure as possible?
I think it's going to start with the same answer as the last one. It's something that you really need to consider right from the beginning, particularly with cybersecurity. That needs to be taken into account at every level of the stack, from the first line of code to the kind of the last deployment into your actual environment, because uh, flaws at any point in that stack can result in a massive issue. And so you really need to have an understanding of your environment from code to infrastructure right from the beginning, implementing good practices in your code, implementing simple and secure design in your cloud if that's your approach, or on premise. I think in particular, you're absolutely right that cloud isn't the only answer, but I think one of the advantages of the cloud is that it allows you to create these well understood, well defined domains and these segments that can be audited, whether automatically by some of the services that the cloud provides, or but by yourself, especially as kind of your infrastructure as code becomes more popular and you're able to really understand exactly what you have running and lock it down with all manner of two-factor authentication and policies that can make that easier.
Hmm. And all of these things, touching on some of these infrastructures, the code you were talking about, all of that isn't just flicking a switch, is it? I mean, you get to the point where you can just essentially flick a switch, but to actually get to that point, to set all these things up, that is a fair bit of work, isn't it? You need to plan for that as part of your deployment.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I think there's part of the part of implementing that effectively is going to be deciding when to do something yourself and when to take something off the shelf. I think when you're talking about security and auditing processes, it's I find typically better to lean towards taking well understood, battle tested um, options off the
Cybersecurity
shelf. So
solutions.
particularly with infrastructure as code, using the AWS modules that help you stand up a secure by default Kubernetes cluster or a database that will be encrypted by default. It's all of these decisions where you don't have to know that you've made every secure decision at every step. You can know that by using these same defaults, that you're achieving that kind of baseline.
And of course, a similar functionality in Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and some different
Absolutely.
customers
Yeah.
use. Brilliant. Okay, we can definitely keep talking about that, but yes, it is meant to be
That's a
short
rabbit hole.
takes, so straight on to revenue growth. And what do people see as being some of the big opportunities for new revenue growth, and how do they see technology as supporting that? The top answer is, yeah, probably not a surprise, expanding into new types of asset classes, new types of products, again, right across the trade life cycle. Brokers always looking into what they can do that's new, whether it's in derivatives, always having half an eye on those ever-changing crypto markets, that's for sure. A lot of interest, I think, around new types of services for their clients, whether it's trading platforms, whether it's different types of analytics portals, whether it's post-trade platforms, giving more visibility, more self-service for a lot of things as well. Again, helping boost the revenue numbers and volumes on that side. Exchanges, certainly as ever, looking at what more they can do with market data, looking at new ways of monetizing that. Certainly, that's what we're seeing on exchanges around the world who are looking at that. And as ever, looking at what types of new products, contracts, new types of platforms as well, whether it's more order driven, whether it's auction type platforms, whether it's spot trading platforms, always looking for new ways of revenue growth and providing new opportunities, new types of products to the market. CCPs, certainly touched on earlier, things like cross product margining, anything that they can do to again attract more volume, allowing capital to be used in a more efficient way. certainly from their perspective, attracts a lot of interest. And I guess also from the regulatory perspective, touching on a previous slide, how they can just smooth a lot of their internal processes as well and make better workflows and then be more robust. Again, will help those volumes. And the clear take behind all these things is that technology is very much an enabler for all of these new products, new insights, and the platform innovation that's happening throughout the market. I guess, Andy, from our perspective, building some of these new solutions, what do we need to do to make sure they're sufficiently flexible? To, let's say, for example, somebody wants to add in a new contract type, or a new asset, or
Mm.
a new market data flow, for example. What's the balance we strike between allowing that flexibility and trying to create something that's far too generic and actually will never work in practice?
I think that's the exact thing, is that it is a balancing act, and that it's going to depend on hitting that sweet spot is always tricky depending on what you're talking about. I think it, you do want to create a generic platform. I think platform is a term and a kind of ethos that's way more popular in the last kind of 10 years. But starting with the ethos of building a platform does leave you the flexibility to build some really valuable products on top of it, with the kind of the good fundamentals underneath that kind of accelerate your kind of speed to market on these new products. But you're absolutely right that it is a balancing act, because if it's too generic and it's too flexible, then you're going to have almost the opposite problem. It's going to take you too much time to just configure this,
Mm.
to configure the thing. You know what I mean? And to be able to actually build something and have that kind of knowledge on how to build it. So it is a balancing act, and I think it really just does rely on those kind of core
Yeah.
fundamentals so that you can move forward with some development time. I think it depends on whether this is just a new contract that can be configured, or something a bit more complicated.
Mhm. And certainly what we've been looking at Sinara to a large extent
Absolutely.
with our modular platform is having those pre-configured, pre-developed building blocks that we can combine with whether it's custom code configuration and so on to create some of those unique solutions. But always a challenge to try and create products that meet that flexibility. And of course, the demand is
Absolutely.
greater than ever. Okay, on to four. And of course, we have to talk about AI and automation in a more general term. We asked about how do you see automation, AI shaping the future of trading operations? And yes, top answer was really around how can it boost trading performance with things like predictive analytics, for example, decision support when making their trading decisions. From perspective of brokers, there's a lot of interest in exploring this. I think the general theme right across the board is interest, exploring, maybe the occasional sort of case study, small prototype projects. I think everyone's looking to see, well, how can we use some of these newer technologies? Maybe you might have an opinion on large language models and in trading operations, but the interest is certainly there, curiosity is certainly there. And
Mm.
as we've seen with some of the AI developments in recent years, there definitely are huge opportunities. It's about finding the right place, the sensible place for using some of these technologies. So yeah, certainly from a broker's perspective and to a huge extent on the buy side as well, it's just really using AI for optimizing execution, finding the right venue, signal generation in the first instance as well. From an exchange's perspective, again, there's opportunities around better surveillance. Again, a lot of systems are already in place around market surveillance generally, but clearly AI provides a good opportunity to spot some of these little anomalies a little bit sooner as well. Again, from the point of view of CCPs and so back office, I put in there earlier from the broker's back office that interacts with CCPs. Again, may well be opportunities around streamlining some of these post-trade collateral operations, settlement operations. There may well be role for AI. I'm not sure whether it's generative AI necessarily in enhancing and reducing some of the workload, certainly for in-house staff on this. So yes, I think that the take really for us is that yes, lots of transformative opportunities, but yes, we need to balance that with strong governance. You have to have clear rules as an organization around how you're using AI, what you're expecting from it. Can you actually explain its results if a customer asks you about? These are all questions for any organization. So I'm sure, Andy, you have opinions on this. I'd love to hear them.
Mm. No, I think you're absolutely right, and I think what I'm going to end with is that idea that you ended with about governance. I think AI and ML are not new to the finance industry, so algo
Mhm.
trading
Yeah.
is a classic form of machine learning and statistical modeling that is it can produce some valuable results. I think AI, as it has become meaning in the last couple of years, whether that's via LLMs. I think there are opportunities there, but I think ultimately there's a lot of risk in the sense that we're talking a lot about numerical data, which
Yeah.
LLMs aren't typically just going to be able to handle naturally. I think, however, that there are a lot of opportunities for LLMs to be a kind of a natural language interface to your company's data.
Yeah.
Um, but
Big
again,
queries
I
and
think the issue, yeah, absolutely querying whether that's customer and client data, whether that's your own policies, whether that's any number of contract data. I think the trouble is, as you say, is governance and explaining results, data security, and ultimately it's. But yeah, I think the I'm trying to think of the right word. The outputs of an LLM being non-deterministic, I think, makes it a
mm,
lot harder to justify the outputs and the issues around hallucinations. I think I'm sounding a bit pessimistic. I think in the terms of large
early days,
financial,
early days.
I think in terms of institutional finance, I think it's a tricky thing to jump in at this stage with.
Yeah,
Um, but it's not to say that it's a dead end by any means. I think it's just
definitely.
a tricky thing to jump all in on at this point.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you said about data. Of course, yeah, finance, we're
Mm,
handling massive amounts of numerical data. But if you do want to run some kind of a query, so querying to data, I think is a great example. You actually need to have that data in a form that actually makes it queryable, presumably by
absolutely.
a future model of whatever sort. So that means presumably your database design, the way your data is structured, it needs to be a form that you can then feed in potentially in the future to an AI model and get something actually valuable out of it.
No, that's very true. I mean, yeah, I mean, you either need access to that database or kind of complete access to a well understood API, and whether that is via I think that the current hotness is MCP or Model Context Protocol to be able to attach your LLMs to your existing databases and APIs. That's a very interesting idea, but that does mean that you need to have access. And so it
Indeed.
can't be some kind of walled garden or siloing off of the data. I think that only makes life more difficult, whether that's so you can use it with any kind of AI, LLMs, or whether it's just so you can hook up to your existing BI
Absolutely, yeah.
platforms,
Provide,
Power
yeah.
BI, AWS QuickSight, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Doing a lot of Power BI
there's
recently. I know you have, Andy.
yeah, so yeah, no, absolutely. I think yeah, it's not the only reason you need it, but it
Yeah.
really reduces friction when you know that you have access to that data and you can use it in to really drive insights.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Okay, last but certainly not least, trading system integration challenges. And we asked, well, what is your biggest challenge when integrating trading systems with all the different external parties that you need to work with? And the top answer, perhaps not surprisingly, was, well, how do we replace some of the outdated technology, legacy systems that we've got out there without causing major disruptions to live operations? People have day jobs. These transformation projects can be time consuming. They are important. And I think we're seeing more and more companies right across the trade cycle recognize the importance of that, certainly in the broker community. And we've seen a lot of issues there, certainly in the front office with legacy OMSs that struggle to connect to new types of new venues, new APIs, new market data feeds coming in. In some cases, the OMS may be, essentially a collection of spreadsheets and pencil and paper operations. That it works well for them for many years, but they do have a limit, and often when expansion plans come into place, that's really when you start seeing the need for a really strong OMS that can actually give you the capability for connecting it to your own clients as well, taking in orders and so on and so forth. So there's a lot certainly in the broker community that technology transformation can assist and boost exchanges. Obviously, ever looking to improve technology, improve their systems from every perspective. They clearly have coordination, whether it's with their CCPs, depositories. T plus one, of course, is coming in the States and gradually rolling around the world and raising the urgency for real-time flows, faster settlements. Some of those batch processes again really start coming into view and need replacing. Similarly, on CCPs, again, post-trade settlement certainly impacts them primarily, but yeah, post-trade integration. They have huge amounts of third-party dependencies, very much systemic dependencies, whether it's payment systems, the exchange, depositories, so on and so forth. And of course, all of the clearing members that are connecting into them and the market data feeds that they need as well to do with mark-to-market margining and so on. So yeah, lots of dependencies there. Certainly always looking at how they can streamline some of these things, make the processes faster, reduce the capacity for human error. So again, lots certainly in the CCP area. Now that's particularly tying in with a lot of push in the CCP community for more diversified revenue sources as well. And I guess from a software design and deployment perspective, if we are faced with the challenge where you have a well-entrenched legacy system that people have been using for a very long time, and we're coming in
Mm.
with a new, more modular solution, all those good things, how do we go about replacing that old one without that major disruption?
Yeah, it's an
Problem.
interesting question. It can be an intimidating prospect to replace such a core piece of your business infrastructure, whether that's ensuring your interfaces with your downstream or your upstream systems, whether it's ensuring that your users have sufficient training and kind of stakeholder buy-in to be able to accept
Yeah.
a new system like that. Ensuring literally a smooth replacement. So whether that's as part of the data migration or the actual go live process, and whether you're going to do a parallel run and do kind of
Yeah.
validate that data alongside, or whether you're just going to go for it and go for a hard cut over. It all requires a tremendous amount of planning, and it requires a lot of buy-in from a lot of stakeholders. It's it does depend on the system, but it is something that you got to take into account from the start. Again, I think that's the same answer I've used two or three times. But whether you're using a platform that exists and you need to work out how you're going to interface with an upstream or a downstream system, whether you're going to kind of morph yourself to match, or what I think is usually a better approach, which is to kind of provide those mappings so that your platform has effectively an adapter to be able to talk to
Yeah.
downstream systems. I think that technically that interface is typically well understood, whether that's a network protocol, like a real-time network protocol like Fix, or whether you're using kind of more static kind of batch dropping like FTP, SFTP, or the kind of cloud equivalent with buckets and object storage. It's a lot to take into account. And that is what makes the process so daunting, but it is possible to do. I think and the results really can aid kind of future velocity when you have that kind of new platform to be able to work with.
But yeah, it is all about starting early and thinking about this
Yeah,
early in the
yeah.
project. How are you going to do your migration? Are you going to have a parallel run?
Mm,
When's it going to start? How long do you need? Training, all of those sorts of things. And of course, yeah, as vendors, we build the systems and there's all of that. UAT, obviously user acceptance
mm,
testing as well. The time for that, the capacity for doing that, all these things will be planned. Obviously, a good technology vendor, we're one of them, can help, of course, a customer. Presumably, we would be talking to a customer about all these things would it be from an early
Yeah,
stage?
absolutely. It has to be taken into account right from the spec work, right from the specification is what interfaces does your existing system have? What stakeholders, what user types do you have? And how can we make sure that we're meeting all of those requirements from the get-go? So that by the time we're talking about UAT and pre-prod and prod, there's no nasty surprises
Not
there. But
surprising, no.
it's been taken into account right from the beginning.
I think integration generally is an important point because yes, we may be
Mm,
replacing, say, an OMS, but let's say the back office is still what it was before. That still needs to integrate with that and needs to work just as
mm.
smoothly as the previous system did. And all of that needs careful planning as part of the project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not just about, and I think that's why earlier I was talking about kind of making sure that you're able to have these adapters to other systems, is so that you're not hampering your kind of future possibilities by kind of tamping down what you're deploying so that it can meet the current requirements. It's so that you are providing a new platform to be able to accelerate further growth. So you provide stable and resilient adapters to the existing systems without holding back your kind of future potential.
Fantastic. No, sounds like a great note to start concluding on. So yes, thank you for listening. I think some of the themes that really come out of this, operational resilience, certainly continues to be front of mind. Generally, compliance pressure is increasing, and all of these things are driving a lot of technology upgrades. As ever, revenue growth, whether it's product expansion, ever-growing data services, whether it is some of those AI-powered insights as well. AI and cloud, great opportunities. I see in both cases they need to be governed properly, proper organizational policies around them. And I think as we were just discussing, integration, some of those legacy tech upgrades, really getting that right, genuinely foundational to getting all these things and really setting up your business for the future. I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much for listening. Obviously, we at Sinara, we're working very much across all of these areas. If you do want to talk to us about any of your technology challenges, ideas, have a look at sinara.com, get in touch, email us at sales@sinara.co.uk, or do pick up the phone and give us a ring on +44 20 7951. Thank you for listening, and until next time.
Thanks.